Was that Alice and Jenny?
Welcome to our event. We're going to get started here in just about another minute. If you've never attended one of our events before, we are Atheists United. We're based out of Los Angeles. We're California's largest member organization for atheists by atheists. We host events on the fourth Sunday of each month, and this month we're hosting the incredible Hemant Mehta, and we are glad you're able to join us. We're just letting a few more people into our event right now. If for some reason you get booted from this event and we have over 100 attendees, it'll be almost impossible for you to get back in, and so we hope you check out our live stream on Facebook. .com. Check out our Atheist United Facebook page and our Facebook event. You'll be able to find the live stream there, and we'll post that in a few other places like our meetup.com page as well. Great. All right. One thing we like to do is those of you tuning in from outside Los Angeles especially, please share in the chat where you're attending from. We keep a very active chat during these events. Look, we already have someone from Australia attending. Welcome, Simon. Yeah, so we have a incredible event for you today. We're gonna get started here. Just give us 60 seconds to let a few more people in. Hang tight, thank you. Awesome. The UK, we're up to 3 continents so far. Let's keep it going. Wonderful. San Luis Obispo, thanks for joining us. Oxford, UK, Bakersfield, Glendale, Sacramento. Always good to have our Sacramento folks. Wonderful. All right, let's get started, folks. My name is Evan Clark. I'm Executive Director of Atheists United here in Los Angeles. We are a member-run organization for atheists in California. We serve the needs of our community and beyond that, help grow thriving atheist communities, advocate for secular values and culture, and for the separation of church and state in our society. We have a fourth Sunday speaker programming we've been doing since 1982. Hemant has spoke to us many times over the years. We're thrilled to have him back. But before we get started, I've got a few announcements, some celebrations of our community, and a video I think you'll all enjoy. So quickly, I want to talk about next month's speaker. We're hosting Chris Stedman, who is an author, activist, community organizer, recently just published a new book called In Real Life, and we'll be speaking about what we can learn about being human from life online. This should be a really interesting exploration about some of the modern science and things he's learned as an organizer over the years around online versus offline identity and life. So we're thrilled for this speaker as well, and we hope you can attend. Go ahead and check out our meetup.com, our Facebook page, our Eventbrite, or our website for more information on this event. I want to quickly mention our fundraising campaign we're doing right now. We have set an ambitious goal of raising $20,000 and $20,210 actually. We wanted to really say goodbye to 2020 by hitting a total of $20,210 for a fundraising campaign. We're extending this into January. We've raised just over 10% of our goal so far, and we really could use your help. Whether it be $100, $1,000, one of you out there might want to drop $10,000. We really could use your support. I want to quickly brag about some of the things we've accomplished this year, just to emphasize why this is so important. So in the past 24 months, for those of you that don't know, I was hired in January of 2019, the first staff member we've ever had for Atheist United, executive director for Atheist United. And since January of 2019, we've hosted over 280 meetups events. We've had 40 speaker events. We launched a new speaker series this year, which had 10 new speakers we brought in. We expanded involvement of our meetup group. We've grown that by 25% just in this past year. We have this meetup network, which is groups all across Southern California that offer events from local meetups to knitting groups and drum circles. If you're in LA, we really would love for you to come out and join one of those when it's safe. Obviously, we've had to move everything online, but we are still hosting over 25 events a month now, which is incredible work. This year, we launched a food bank. We partnered with the LA Food Bank and started hosting on our own property a food distribution. And this past week, actually, we gave out over 100 families worth of groceries. We gave out 2 tons of food and had 20 volunteers support that. This year, we worked with Humanist International on creating the freemubarakbala.org campaign, which had people fight for freeing Mubarak Bala, who's the president of Humanists of Nigeria, from detainment for critiquing the Prophet Muhammad. Unfortunately, he's still in detainment. It's been over 200 days he's been in jail for essentially what seems like his religious identity. We've been featured in the LA Times, NPR, Religious News Service, ABC. We hosted a secular student scholarship this year for $1,000. We even launched a sexy new website, which I hope you check out. One of my favorite accomplishments is we've worked with a coalition of groups in Southern California to launch a new Southern California Secular Coalition, and are now organizing retreats and much larger region-wide events that wouldn't be possible without organizations like Atheist United. So anyways, I could brag all day. That's my job. But what I'd love your help with is just funding our community and our activism, because when this pandemic ends, and it will someday hopefully end, we're still going to need to fight like hell against the Christian nationalists, the anti-vaxxers, the pseudoscientists, and the misinformation peddlers of our time. So communities like Atheist United aren't just critical for atheists, they're critical for the success of a secular society. So thank you for the members and donors we currently have. And for those of you that haven't checked it out yet, please go check out our campaign on our website and our Facebook page. All right, got that out of the way. I want to quickly introduce you to one of those meetup groups that I was talking about. This one's called Voices of Reason. So we are one of the only communities in the world that has a atheist choir. And I'm going to quickly play a video they made for you all in communities like ours. We normally do something called an Atheist Minute to kick off these events, where we have a member from our community share a short story. This month, I'm going to share a video created by our choir. All right. Give me a thumbs up if the audio is working. A second.
First you realize worship. And then in the end, yes, in the end, and Barack Obama's cousin is Dick Cheney. Well, now doesn't that make for some interesting town hall discussions? Where he left her mom and dad, drifting out across the world, and messed it up real bad, messed it up really bad. We're all one dysfunctional family, no matter where we roam. Bridge valleys, drifting home, Take a look inside your jeans and partner, then you will see we've all got a birth certificate from Kenya.
Great. Thank you for all of those. Here, hold on a second. I just put that up. For all of those members of Voices of Reason, I want to thank you for constantly creating incredible content for all of us. We normally have music at our in-person events. It's been a long time since we've been able to share some music with you all, so thank you again. Hemant, I'm going to get you set up here. I think since you rejoined, I got to make you a host again. Let me do that right now. Great. Let me check if there's any more announcements. I'll rip for a second. We have two new board members that just joined us. I want to celebrate super quickly. Danny and Bill, thank you for volunteering as tributes for our organization. I'll share more about you in January. And then I quickly want to mention our membership. So Atheist United is a membership-run organization. I mentioned at the very beginning. I'll hand it over to Hemant in a second, but for $45 a year, you can become a part of this organization. And events like these become free to you. So for normally we have these in person in a theater, we have music and food. We ask for a $10 suggested donation, which we hope we are still able to offer if the coronavirus and the economic impact from that hasn't taken your job. But yeah, our membership gives you access to all types of incredible events. It props up the 100 to 200 events we're offering each quarter, and really wouldn't be able to do it without you. So thank you to our members. Thank you to our future members that are going to sign up by the end of this call. And yeah, thank you to especially people like our Voices of Reason that continue to fill us with art and joy during these incredibly challenging times. For those of you, especially in Los Angeles, I believe we're the worst hit city in the world right now for COVID-19. So my heart especially is with all of you. We'd love to be able to meet in person and help each other out right now. We hope you're staying as safe as possible in person. With that, Hemant, I hope you're ready. Let's get this party started.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Great. Yes.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Evan. Thank you to all of you for tuning in for this. I just want to reiterate, if you're watching this, if you're part of this, if you're live streaming it, whatever it is, please, please, please consider joining Atheists United. Donate, become a member, whatever it is. It means a lot. We've been trying to make this event happen for more than a year. The latest thing is I was supposed to come in March, and then that got postponed for reasons. So I'm really grateful to be here. I want to talk about politics, which I know is like everyone's favorite thing to talk about all the time, but hopefully you'll find it kind of inspiring, because I certainly do, and I'm a very cynical person, so I hope you find it interesting as well. I'm going to screen share here, so I hope you can all see this. Let's see if we can get this to work. Give me 1 second here.
Sending
Boom.
thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
It works.
And hopefully that's working and you can
Yep.
see me all right.
That's embarrassing.
So, and if I'm looking off to the side of my screen, it's only because I have some notes on the side here. So just to give you some background about me, my name is Hemant Mehta. I write at friendlyatheist.com. I've been doing that for way too long now, 13 some years. I write about current events and atheism, less about the philosophy and more about the impact it has and what happens after you're an atheist. What do you do with that? And so that's kind of been my focus. If you're interested, friendlyatheist.com is the website. If you search for that on YouTube, you'll find me as well. There's a podcast. It's all under Friendly Atheist. Just Google it. You'll find me there. And so let me give you a few caveats before I kind of start this talk. I'm going to try to cram like 2 hours of material into a 30-40 minute speech, and then there will be time for Q&A afterwards if you have them. So if you have questions, feel free to write them down. Here are some of the caveats to this speech. This is not a partisan speech. It's going to very much seem like it is, but I'm very much trying to not make it a partisan speech, but you'll see later in the talk why it leans in that direction, even though I'm not trying to do that. So not partisan. The other thing is I'm talking about atheists in government. And I would strongly make the argument that we don't necessarily need atheists in government because there's nothing wrong with having religious people in government who also support church-state separation and science education. And there are tons of them out there. They're great. I have no problem with that. So I'm not saying we need a government only with atheists. So this isn't arguing that either. The reason I want to talk about why it matters to have atheists in government is because I think symbolism matters. This is the incoming freshman class of Congress people from 2018. And this picture matters. It matters to me. It matters to a lot of people because it matters when you have a Muslim congresswoman or a transgender state rep or a bisexual senator in ways that I think goes beyond identity politics. It matters to have someone who looks like you, who believes like you, who thinks like you in places of power. So this is part of why I think we want more atheists in politics. How many of you, I mean, I know it's a rhetorical question, I can't see you, but how many of you have ever had this experience of coming out to somebody as an atheist, a friend, a colleague, coworker, and you tell them you're an atheist, and their reaction back to you is, "Oh, I thought you were a good person." And the reason that seems kind of jarring, and they probably mean well by it, it's because atheism has this stigma of being immoral, of being bad people, whatever they take that to mean. In fact, just earlier this year, the Pew Research Center did this study where they asked people, who's the first person who comes to your mind when you hear the word atheist? And they had, you could see from this picture, 51% of people couldn't think of anybody. They could not name an individual that they associated with atheism. 26% said a variety of one-off names. Bill Maher, Stephen Hawking, Barack Obama for some reason. But there were 3 people that made this list. And these were 3 individuals who ranked in enough number that they warranted their own spot on the list. Number 3 was Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who was the president of American Atheists for a really long time. And of course, she was murdered back in the 90s. I think that one makes sense. But to me, that also suggests that the vision of what it means to be an atheist in America is still tied to things that happened 20 to 30 years ago. That image hasn't left the minds of many people. She's also been gone for 25 years. So it's amazing that she's still synonymous with atheism in so many ways. Number 2 on the list is Richard Dawkins. I don't think that's a surprise. I think a lot of people today would think about Richard Dawkins when you think about atheism, whether it's because of the God delusion or whether it's because he's the one person every reporter in the world goes to if they want commentary on atheism. For better or for worse, he is the person who comes to mind when people think of atheism. But he's number 2. Who is number 1 on this list? I mean, think about that for a second. Who would be the one person who stands above and beyond all these other people, higher than Dawkins, higher than Madeleine Murray O'Hair, higher than Bill Maher, or Obama, when it comes to who they think of when it comes to atheism? The number one answer, Satan. 6% of people thought of Satan when they heard the word atheist. And obviously that's almost silly for a number of reasons, partly being we don't believe in Satan. But that's interesting because it just suggests to me we don't have a great image. And I wish we did. I wish when people thought of us, they thought of happy, nice things. And I think you could make the argument that Satan and Dawkins and Madeleine Murray O'Hair are not necessarily the friendliest images who come to mind when you think of atheism for the general public. And I'm not even talking about bad faith interpretations of who they are. That's who people think of in general. And by the way, I would also argue, like, if you think of people who make you smile, if you think of Bill Maher, someone who is a comedian who talks about religion in his act on his show, I mean, as a comedian, one of his goals is to mock religion. He thinks that's a powerful thing. He wants to punch back, and I mean that in a good way, but he's making jokes about religion. His job is not to win over the hearts and minds of devout Christians. He wants to poke fun at religion. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's what he does. What about people like Dawkins? If you talk about the God delusion, I think he said in the very opening of his book, if I succeed, by the time you close this book, you will no longer believe in this nonsense, the nonsense of religion, which is fine. That's not a bad goal. But his job is not to just be an atheist and get along with people. It's to get you to stop being religious because he thinks that's an important thing to do. And listen, I'm an atheist activist. Many of you are atheist activists. There's nothing wrong with that. But imagine for a second, this is why I think, I'm going to go back for a second. This is why I think politics matters. Because think about this for a second. Politics, when you are in government, you are theoretically fighting for everybody. You are fighting to represent as many people as possible, all of your constituents. And your job is not to promote atheism. And even if you're Christian and you're in politics, your job should not be to promote Christianity. I think politics may be the best opportunity for many Americans to see respectable atheists in a position of public power where their job is not mocking or denigrating religion. And again, I want to be clear. I don't think there's anything wrong with pointing out the problems with religion. But there's a difference between Richard Dawkins, who his self-described job is kind of to get you to stop thinking that way, versus a representative or a senator who happens to be an atheist, whose job is to just make your life better. Oh, and by the way, they happen to be an atheist. I mean, I think that would get people thinking differently about what it means to be an atheist. And if they were really effective at what they did, I think it would change the perception, the wrong perception among many people, that we can't be good people. That is why I think it's important to have atheists in public life, in a position where their job is not to advocate for atheism. Let that be my job. Let that be your job, but it doesn't have to be the job of a representative. Let me go back to about 25 years ago. This is the cover of the New Republic, and it says The Last Taboo. This is an article by the writer Wendy Kaminer, and it said, atheism, she said atheism was the last taboo in politics. Politicians keep saying we should inject more religion into our public life, but what we really need is a healthy dose of atheism. This, if you could see the date on this cover, it's 1996. And it's almost comical, I should say, to call atheism the last taboo because we still had not had a Black president or a female nominee, much less openly LGBTQ individual. So I think it's a bit weird to call it the last taboo, being atheism. But I do want to point out one thing Wendy Kaminer wrote in this article, because I think it makes a point. Atheists generate about as much sympathy as pedophiles. Try to imagine an avowed atheist running successfully for public office. I know this is not on your screen. When politicians proclaim their belief in God, regardless of their religion, they are signaling their trustworthiness. By declaring your belief, you imply that an omnipotent, omniscient, and benign force is the source of your values and ideas. And I don't think she's entirely wrong. I mean, how many politicians, how many commercials, campaign commercials did you see this past year? Maybe for local politics more than national ones, where one of the things they say, because they want to introduce themselves to the public, if you don't know them, is my name is whatever it is. And you know what means a lot to me? My family, my faith. And it's very little about policy. I mean, just saying you are a religious person, part of a church community, is supposed to be a stand-in for you can trust me. I mean, a lot of people do it. That is not a one-party thing. A lot of politicians do that because it's a simple way to show people you're trustworthy. But imagine if you can't do that because you're not religious, or can you imagine the campaign commercial where someone says, I'm not religious, but you should trust me for the following reasons? I think people would change the channel right away. That's a hard sell. And that animus has been around for a long time. This is a amusing picture, but there are 7 states where their constitutions still say atheists can't run for public office. All of those are invalid. None of them would hold up in a court of law. But on paper, because they were written a long time ago, these things are still in their state constitutions. And everywhere else, by the way, atheists holding public office is merely frowned upon. I want to show you what this looks like in practice, because it's one thing to talk about this theoretically, but let's talk about what this means and how this comes into play. In 2008, I know it's a blank screen. That's okay. In 2008, let me set the scene for you. Barack Obama's running for president, but in North Carolina, there was a huge, important Senate race. Not just a Senate race. It was a Democrat whose name was Kay Hagan. There she is, Kay Hagan. She was a state official from North Carolina. She was the Democrat running for the Senate seat in 2008. And she was running against Elizabeth Dole, the wife of the former Republican nominee, Bob Dole. So both of these women are pretty strong candidates. And this was probably not just you have 2 women on the ballot, you have a lot of money being poured into this race because both parties think this is a winnable seat. And at one point, and when it's a close race, and all the polls suggested it was a close race, any side is looking for an edge. And at one point, the Elizabeth Dole campaign, the Republican campaign, found out that Kay Hagan went to a fundraiser hosted by someone who happens to be an atheist. That's not what the fundraiser was about. They just knew, oh, she went to the home of an atheist for this fundraiser. And just like that, Kay Hagan's people, Elizabeth Dole's people released the following ad. I'm going to show it to you. This is actually the ad they ran in North Carolina.
I'm Elizabeth Dole, and I approved this message.
A leader of the Godless Americans PAC recently held a secret fundraiser in Kay Hagan's honor.
There is no God to rely on. There was no Jesus.
Well, taking under God out of the Pledge of Allegiance, you're down with that.
We're down with that.
In God we trust, you're going to whip that off the money?
Yeah, we would.
Godless Americans and Kay Hagan. She hid from cameras, took godless money. What did Hagan promise in return?
There is no God.
That's a real ad. They played that ad on TV. Kay Hagan had nothing to do with the Godless Americans PAC. Kay Hagan did not say there is no God, but they basically said, what? We found a very loose link to an atheist? Let's just hammer home the idea that she is connected to atheists somehow, which, by the way, I think she was a Sunday school teacher. She's absolutely not an atheist. But here's the amazing thing about that ad. It backfired. There were so many local journalists who are like, what are you doing? One, you're trying to slander Kay Hagan for something she isn't. And also, that's just not cool. Why are you slamming on atheists? What did they do to you? By the way, I don't know what we got in return for that, because I promise you, not that I was active in this campaign or anything, she did not promise atheists anything. I don't really know what godless money looks like and why it's different from any other money either, for what it's worth. And Elizabeth Dole kind of had to answer for that ad, and it didn't look good because you can't justify that sort of slander against people. And here's the good news about that. In 2008, Kay Hagan won that race. So the ad backfired. I should say Kay Hagan ran again in 2014. She lost to a guy named Tom Tillis. Kay Hagan has since passed away. Tom Tillis just ran for re-election in 2020, and he narrowly beat Cal Cunningham in North Carolina. So that's a tough loss if you're supportive of Democrats right there. But this is what happened in 2008. And this is before we really started talking about atheists in politics. And this is just kind of indicative of what happens. She's not even an atheist. They just tried to tie her to one. Imagine if she was an atheist. And imagine if any candidate was an atheist, what would happen to them? So here's my question to all of you. Rhetorical question. How toxic is it to be an atheist in politics today? And that's what I want to figure out. And the truth is, I think Wendy Kaminer still kind of had a point when it comes to Congress. I think if you're running for national office, it's still really hard to be an open atheist. But I do think that's changing. And I think a lot of the reason that is changing is because of what we are seeing at state level politics and local level politics. So I'm going to talk about some of that right now. So she had a point when she wrote that article in 2006. I'm going to go back for a second. There were literally 0 open atheists in 1996. And 10 years later, in 2006, this is after The End of Faith came out by Sam Harris, after The God Delusion was released, people were talking about the new atheism, for better or for worse. So there's a lot of talk about atheism. You would think maybe that spills over into politics. I was volunteering with a group called the Secular Coalition for America at the time. It's a lobbying organization in Washington, D.C. It still exists today. They still do amazing work, but their goal is to represent godless Americans on Capitol Hill. They have a lobbyist. And among the discussions we were having with the Secular Coalition for America is, can anyone name the highest ranking elected official in America who is also open about their atheism? And I mean, we are talking about a room full of people who are well connected in politics, who are active and involved and donors in politics. And the truth is, no one could really think of the highest ranking person. I mean, openly atheist. Some of them were like, I know this congressperson who is not religious, but they would never say that out loud, which to me, that doesn't really count then if they're going to hide that. And we thought one of the board members at the time, his name is David Niosi. He worked for the American Humanist Association for a long time. He was their chair for a while. He had an idea for a contest. What if we just asked people to nominate the highest ranking openly atheist politician they could find? And if you were right, and if that politician said, yes, I am an open atheist, we will give you $1,000 for nominating them. We thought at least it's not a crazy amount of money, but maybe we can get some bites on that. And honestly, we were like, best case scenario here, depending on your point of view, maybe it turns out Dick Cheney in 2006 is an open atheist and no one knew. I don't know if that'd be good, but there you go. Worst case scenario, the highest ranking elected official we could find is like some local dog catcher somewhere, in which case that also proves a point that we are trying to make, which is that there is this stigma against atheists in politics. And we should talk about that a little more because that's crazy. And it turned out someone said, my congressman is openly non-religious. And the Secular Coalition sent him basically a questionnaire saying, hey, are you non-religious? Do you believe in a higher power? And it turned out this guy, Pete Stark of California, said, well, I'm a Unitarian, but I don't believe in a higher power. And the Secular Coalition was like, can you say that out loud? Is that something you talk about? And he said, sure, I'll say that out loud, that I don't believe in a higher power, but I don't call myself an atheist. I'm a Unitarian. And we're like, we'll take it. So Pete Stark came out as openly non-religious. He's the first one. He was a Unitarian who did not believe in a supreme being. That's a big deal. And here's what's amazing about that. This was 2007. He came out. He got reelected in 2008. I believe he got reelected in 2010. It didn't hurt him politically speaking, partly because he was a Democratic congressman in a pretty safely blue district, but it also, that I don't know that matters. Like, it still didn't hurt him, and that's a big deal. I want to say, I should point out, in 2012, he got primaried by this guy named Eric Swalwell, who you may have seen if you watch MSNBC a lot. This guy is on the House Judiciary Committee. He's on the House Intelligence Committee. He was doing a lot of interviews during the Mueller investigation. And if you're a liberal, you probably really like this guy because he's very outspoken about his positions. He won his seat in 2012 because he beat Pete Stark in the primary. He was AOC before it was cool. And one of the reasons he won, though, and I want to point this out, and I say this as a guy who likes Eric Swalwell a lot, when he was running against Pete Stark, you're wondering, well, how do you beat a popular, powerful Democrat who's sitting in the House? And it turns out there was a vote that year to reaffirm "In God We Trust" as our national motto. The vote was 398-9 to reaffirm "In God We Trust" as our national motto. Pete Stark was one of those 9 people who said, why do we have a religious motto? We shouldn't have that. And this is what Eric Swalwell's website said at the time. Do we trust Pete Stark to represent our views? And this is what he said on the website. The 15th Congressional District deserves a member of Congress who is in touch with people, can work well with others, and can honor our national motto. Like, Eric Swalwell, what are you doing? I wouldn't say this is the reason, this is the only reason he beat Pete Stark, but it's like, come on, dude, what are you doing? But Eric Swalwell won. Pete Stark lost his race. Pete Stark has also since passed away. But Eric Swalwell won, and all of a sudden we are down to 0 elected atheists, openly atheist people in Congress, which is depressing. This is a survey the Pew Research Center puts out every 2 years when we have a new Congress getting, what's the word I'm looking for? They take their oath, they get seated. And this is all the religions of everyone in Congress. This picture you're looking at is from, let me double check here. This is the 116th Congress. This is in 2012, I believe. I'm sorry. This is a couple years ago. But you can see there's one unaffiliated member of Congress. The only person who is openly unaffiliated is Kyrsten Sinema, a senator from Arizona. And I just want to point out, like, she doesn't call herself an atheist in any sort of way. So, with all that said, I'm just trying to make the point here. It's really hard to be an open atheist in politics. It's such a taboo thing. It can so easily be used against you. So it's easier for a lot of politicians who have a chance of winning to kind of avoid it as much as possible. And I think this has ramifications because when there are no atheists in Congress, it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You begin to think atheists can't be in Congress. And if you were paying attention to the Democratic primaries earlier this year, I heard the same argument being made against people like Elizabeth Warren. Like, I like her, but she's unelectable. No, she's not. You only think she is, but that changes once she gets elected. They said it about Obama. You know, a black man can't be elected president. Well, guess what? When one does, suddenly that becomes the norm. And I think that's true of atheists as well. When you get atheists in office, it becomes a less weird thing. And so here's the thing. This is then. Things have changed in the past decade. So let me get to the good news part of this talk. Almost. In 2012, they do a survey. The Gallup polling does a survey every 4 years. And they ask people, would you vote for the president? Would you vote someone for president from your preferred political party if that person were a blank? And in 2012, this is where atheists were. 54% of people said they would consider voting for an atheist in their party. Like, all other things being equal, only 54% said, yeah, I'll give it a shot. 43% are like, nope, can't do it. Wouldn't do it even if I liked that person's politics. And just take a look at the numbers in the 90s. Would you vote for someone who's black? 96% of people are like, well, if I like their politics, who cares? That's fine. That's good. 95% of people would vote for a woman, plus 90 for a Catholic, Hispanic, Jewish. Those things are not really deal breakers. Doesn't matter what party you're in. If you like their politics, you're not going to say no to them just because they fall in those categories. And yet atheism is still at the bottom of the list. And by the way, when this poll came out in 2012, atheists celebrated You know why? Because that topped 50%, and that had never happened before. So here's the deal. After all of this, after this happened, this is the same chart. This is the same Gallup poll. And you could see that 54% right there in 2012 is still moving up from what it used to be. You could see in 1958, it used to be 18%. Like, we've gone up, but we haven't gone up as much as all these other groups. And I wish we did. So the question is, what has happened since then? Well, guess what? In 2016, this is Hillary versus Trump. They asked the same question. And here's atheists at the bottom of the list. Oh my God, that's not us anymore. We're over here. We're at 58%. Thanks, Bernie Sanders. Socialist is the new bottom of the chart. But atheists are at 58%. Not bad, considering there was no atheist on the ticket. And it's just a theoretical option as well. And you have to ask yourself, why is this number going up? Because 58% is better than it used to be. What's the reason for that? And this is up for grabs. I think you could make an argument as to why this is happening. I think some of the arguments you could make are, as of 2016, you saw this merging of the Republican Party with white evangelical Christians. Suddenly, atheism doesn't look that bad. You saw it from the past decade before 2016. There are more books and blogs and podcasts and groups for atheists. There is a growing, broader internet where you don't have to be in the closet about your atheism anymore. There are church scandals places. Like, there's a lot of reasons people may not think religion is a virtue in politics as much as they used to be. I would also point out that all of those things we talked about earlier, would you vote for someone? Look at those groups that are in the 90th percentile there. Like, they're like being black, being a woman, being Catholic. Those are not deal breakers, but they're lower than they used to be. People have a lot of weird thoughts about the 2016 elections. But here's something about this. Since 2016, we have actually seen a congressman come out as openly non-religious. Jared Huffman, a Democrat from your state of California. Jared Huffman does not use the word atheist either, but he said in 2017 he's a humanist. I mean, he follows that philosophy. He actually used a lowercase h, if that matters to anyone. But he said he's a humanist. And then when they asked him, why are you a humanist? Why are you not an atheist? I did not love his answer. He said, I'm not hostile to religion, and I'm not judging anyone else's religious views, as if all atheists are hostile to religion and judging everyone. But he came out as non-religious. And then I was super excited because in 2018, they put out that Pew survey with the religions of everyone in Congress. And I was so excited to see a humanist on this list. And there's Jared Huffman. No, he's not there. It's one unaffiliated person, and that's Kirsten Sinema. Where is Jared Huffman on this list? Turns out he didn't fill out the survey. Jared, you had one job. What are you doing? But since then, I should say, Jared Huffman has actually changed his profile in Congressional Roll Call, which is the source they get all this information from, and it now says he's a humanist. Next Monday, the week after tomorrow, Pew is going to come out with their latest iteration of this "What Religion is Everyone in Congress" chart for the next Congress. I'm kind of excited that it'll say humanist for the first time ever. That's a week from tomorrow, so that's kind of exciting. And what I especially appreciate about Jared Huffman is that he's understood all the stuff I've been talking about so far. He knows there's this taboo against being non-religious in Congress, and I think he's kind of made it his mission to make sure it's not as bad of a thing in politics to be openly non-religious, because to that end, he created, with the help of Jamie Raskin, who you see on the screen here, he created the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. The Free Thought Caucus. There is a Congressional Prayer Caucus full of like right-wing Christians. He made the Congressional Free Thought Caucus with the goal of promoting church-state separation and reason-based policies and opposing things like blasphemy laws. These are things religious people ought to be on board with. And guess what? It turns out he's dragging as many people as he can into this caucus of his. Those were the first 6, but guess what? There's another 6 right there. They just got 2 more members this year. Rashida Tlaib is in there, like a member of the squad. I should point out, Jared Huffman is the only openly non-religious person on this list. Jamie Raskin is a humanist if you talk to anyone who knows him, but on paper he says he's Jewish because that's what he's most comfortable with as an identity. I don't care. That's all well and good. But everyone else on this list is on paper religious. They're from all over the place. They run the spectrum. Like, they're not all the most progressive Democrats in the Democratic Party, though they are all from the Democratic Party. But the truth is, I don't know why more people are not on this list, because again, this is not a group that is there to promote atheism. It's there to say, we want a secular government. Church-state separation should be bipartisan. Reason-based policies should be all of Congress. It's not. There's 14 members. The Congressional Prayer Caucus has like over 100 people and a budget. These guys kind of have a functioning website, maybe, but it's a start. It's important. And I also want to return, if you're wondering, because I certainly was wondering, that Gallup poll about presidential races. What did they say in 2020? What did they say this year as we're talking about this? And it turns out they did a Gallup poll earlier this year. Would you vote for someone in your party for president? And there's atheist. It's at 60%. It's still going up. I know it's not as high as you want it to be, but it is still going up. And I should say, if you break this thing down by age, oh my goodness, if you look at people under like 39, I think, or maybe under 35, it's in the high 70s. I mean, that applies to Democrats and Republicans. Very few, much fewer younger people care if the people in the presidential, in the White House are non-religious. That's an amazing change right there. And by the way, I should say it's 60%, and there wasn't even an open atheist running for office this time around. Like, no one in the 97,000 field Democratic primary was openly non-religious. Maybe you think Bernie Sanders is. He's also not on that list of non-religious people. So here's the other thing I want to point out. This is just presidential race. This is a separate beast. What happens at the state level? I began tracking this as best I can. I'm going to get out of the screen share for a second, and I'm going to share something with all of you. If I can get back here. Sorry, let's see if I can do this. I'm putting a link in the chat that you could see. Go ahead and click on that. But I started tracking all the openly non-religious candidates running for state and federal office. I did it in 2018. I did it in 2020. This is based on the work of the Center for Free Thought Equality, which is an arm of the American Humanist Association. They're a nonprofit group, but this is a political arm of what they do, which is something a lot of advocacy groups have. There's nothing wrong with that. So the Center for Free Thought Equality basically sends out a questionnaire to everybody running for office once the primary season begins. They send it to local offices too. I think they sent out their questionnaire to thousands of people across the nation, 3,000 to 4,000 maybe this time around. They told me they got responses from about 477 people. And from that list, they literally put out endorsements for a large number of them. And this list is a list of everyone I knew, because I'm not connected with the Center for Free Thought Equality. This is everybody I knew who was running for office. Either they are part of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, or they ran for U.S. House or the state legislature, who was openly non-religious in some way or another. And as you could see from this list, as you scroll down, there's a lot of green on there. A lot of people won their races. A lot of them were incumbents, but some of them were not. And here's the thing. As you can keep looking at that, that link will be there for you. What's amazing to me is that, as far as I could tell, none of these people who ran for office at the state or federal level, none of them who ran as open atheists, even though that's not the thing they were bragging about, because why would they? It wasn't used against them in any of these races. Not all of these people are running in blue districts, but even Republicans at this point would not use their atheism by itself as a way to go after them, because I think even they know it would backfire. That is incredible to me. Some of these people are running as open atheists. Some of them use different language as their primary identity, but it wasn't a factor in any of their races. If they lost, it's for most of these cases, they lost because they were running in deeply red districts where pretty much any Democrat would have lost. And I say that, by the way, I say Democrat because every single person on this list, every single candidate who won their primary or advanced past their primary unopposed, who was on the ballot in November and was openly non-religious, every single one of them was a Democrat. I'm not trying to hide the Republicans from this list. There were 0 Republicans I could find who were openly non-religious and ran for office. So I'm going to go back to my presentation here for a second, but I will put that link back up for anyone who wants to see it later. So I should say one of the things that excites me about that list is because there are, I think, 57 state representatives or state senators who are now openly religious. When I did that in 2018, I literally had one official tell me privately she used my list to find co-sponsors in her state for a bill she was writing. I had one official who DM'd me on Twitter and said, how come I'm not on this list? I'm openly non-religious. And I'm like, we don't know who you are. Tell me more. Now she's on that list. And so that's really exciting. I want to close out this talk, and I'll wrap it up here by just leaving you with some words of advice, or at least some takeaways from all of this. I think one question everyone tends to want to know is, well, what's the key to success here? How did those people get elected, even though they're openly non-religious? And I think one way to answer that question, let me point this out before I move on. This is the Center for Free Thought Equality. They do their endorsements, like I mentioned, and this is the Free Thought Equality Fund endorsements. In 2014, they endorsed 18 candidates who were either openly non-religious or allies, willing to be open allies of the non-religious community. 7 of them were elected. In 2016, they did 61 endorsements. 44 of those people got elected. By the way, this is not just symbolic. The Free Thought Equality Fund sent these candidates money as an advocacy group, hoping they would get elected. In 2018, 291 endorsements. 68 people got elected. And because this time around, I believe they had 477 people who said, we are open to getting your endorsement. We're not going to say no if you endorse us. They actually had to be more picky. So the number is going to go down from 291. But check this out. You're the first ones to see this, I believe. 191 endorsements, 72 people got elected. And I just want to point out that 72 includes Congress with Jared Huffman. It includes state level House members, state Senate members, some local officials, and a few allies of the non-religious community. So even though they were pickier about their endorsements, more candidates actually won this time around. And I think that's definitely worth mentioning. So let me go back to the thing about success. How do you get these candidates to win? And I think Megan Hunt is a wonderful case study for how to make this work. Megan Hunt is in Nebraska's legislature. Nebraska's legislature is the one you may remember from civics classes in high school or something. They don't have a state house. They kind of just have the unicameral state Senate. They just have the unicameral. She ran for office in 2018, and she was a challenger, had never run for political office before. Her website was fine. Like, there was nothing especially catchy for me as an atheist on her website. But when it came down to the ballot, there were 2 candidates on the list. It was her and another challenger. And a local paper did a short article about these are the 2 candidates running for the unicameral. Here's their biography. Let us introduce them to you. And I was reading that, and here's one thing that I saw. They had this little sidebar in the article. And over here, what's her faith? She wrote down atheist. And I was thinking to myself, oh no, Megan, what are you doing? You're not supposed to say that out loud. And then she won. And then she got sworn in. There she is. She's the short one. And she wasn't on the ballot in 2020.
I'm gonna share screen again.
I'm sorry. Can you see that? I should share
No,
screen.
we're still
There we
seeing
go. Let
just
me
you.
go back to that. Boom. Sharing the screen. And there you go. So there she is again. Boom. So she got elected in 2018. She was back in 2020. She'll be on the ballot next time around. But I asked her, how did being an open atheist not hurt your candidacy, especially in Nebraska, which is by and large a red state? if you overall, even though parts of it are very blue. And she basically said, well, I'm an atheist. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm paraphrasing here. She's like, I'm not ashamed of that, but it doesn't define who I am, certainly not as a politician. And this is the thing she wanted people to take away. Like, you don't have to be ashamed of it, but you also have to let people know I'm not here to be an atheist. I am here to make your life better. I am here to try to pass legislation that benefits you. So she kind of took the air out of the balloon for anyone who might want to use it against her. What are they going to say? Like, Megan Hunt is an atheist. And she could just be like, yeah, I am. Let me tell you how I want to fix the roads. Let me tell you how I want to help small businesses in our state because I'm a small business owner myself. And that's kind of the key. She put it out there, and basically it made it impossible to use it against her. And I think that is a key for anyone who's thinking about running for office, whether you're in a safe blue district or even in a red district. You could say, yeah, sure, this is my personal belief, but you know what? I am here because I want to represent people of faith in this legislature. I want to make sure it's safe for your churches to meet back up again, which means taking care of the pandemic right now. I mean, there is a way to do this when you can openly say, I'm not here to advocate for atheism when I'm here. I've seen her do interviews with atheists, by the way, where they kind of want her to talk about her atheism. And she's the first one to kind of downplay it and saying, I am an atheist, but I am here speaking to you as a politician. And let me tell you why you should support the things I'm supporting. Or let me tell you what I'm going to do to help you out. She's really good at that. And I think this is one key for any open atheist running anywhere. I personally don't need you running as an atheist. I need you running as a good politician. Let me take care of hey, you guys, she's an atheist. That's really cool. That's my job. That's not her job. That is true for anybody out there. If it's one of many things people know about you, it's really hard to use that against you. If being an atheist is the only thing people know about you, that could be political poison. And I think that's kind of a message. It doesn't matter where you live in America. That's kind of the key. So if there are any open atheists thinking about running for office, don't hide it. But obviously, if you're running for office, don't make it the centerpiece of your campaign the way some politicians make being a Christian the centerpiece of their campaign. I've heard way too many campaign commercials that say, like, I'm a Christian first, I am a conservative second, I'm a Republican third, or some variation of that where they put their faith front and center. Yeah, you may not want to do that if you're an atheist candidate, but it doesn't necessarily get used against you. Here's another thing I want to point out. This is a chart I want you all to look at carefully. I know there's a lot going on here, but the blue lines basically say the percentage of people who are openly non-religious in America, or they're not part of any organized religion. And over the past couple of decades, we've seen that chart go up a lot. This stops in 2016 at 25%. Right now, the percentage of Americans who are not connected to any organized religion is hovering between 30 and 40%. I mean, it's big. Now, that's exciting. That's great. Here's the downside. Look at the orange bars. That tells you what percentage of voters were openly non-religious or not part of any organized religion. And again, we're talking, yes, atheists and agnostics, but also people who are just nuns. They don't subscribe to anything, or people who believe in a higher power, but they don't go to church or anything. So yeah, we're growing as a percentage of the American populace. We are not really growing as a percentage of voters. We vote below our weight as a people. Evangelical Christians vote above their weight as a percentage of the population, and they have a lot to show for that. We don't. I should tell you, in 2016, I know it's not on the chart, the number was about 15% voted. So again, it's a little higher than before. It's not great considering we're 25% of the population. Now, you're probably wondering, as I was, what happened in 2020? Because now we're 30 to 40% of the population. And the truth is, we don't really have good numbers on what happened in this election, partly because so many people voted by mail, which makes it really hard to get data on their religious backgrounds. So this is the closest thing I found. This is actually from Fox News, but I have no problem with the survey itself. They asked people, what is your religion? And if you look at the none section, I can't see the number in front of me right here. It's because the screens are blocking it. I think that's 70 some percent, 72%. No, I'm sorry, 20. What's the number there? 21% right there.
21 for none, 72 for Biden.
Right. So we're
26.
21% of the voting population, even though we are 30 to 40% of the American population. We are still voting below our weight. And most of us voted for Joe Biden, most of us in the non-religious camp. And my proposal to all of you is, if we tried to do more to get more non-religious people voting, and voting for our values, not because we're atheists, but voting for things you would think a lot of us have in common, which is church-state separation, science education, evidence-based policies, there is an audience there that is under-engaged that we want to take advantage of, like in a good way. So I just want to point that out there. The last thing I will leave you with, and then I will open it up for questions. I just want to point out, this is kind of the only numbers we have to work off of because, again, it was a weird election. We don't have as strong data this year as we did in previous elections just because there were so many mail-in ballots. Last thing is, for anyone who is watching this or live streaming this, please consider running for office. This is not a partisan statement. I think in general, because there are definitely exceptions to the rule, what I have found is people who are openly non-religious tend to care about church-state separation and evidence-based policy, and they care about data and research, and they are not there to advocate for atheism or religion. They are there to do a good job. Their hearts are in the right places. We do not run for office as a group the way conservative Christians run for office. And I think we should. There are so many websites that sprang up, especially since 2016. This is one of my favorites. It's just called Run for Something. We will help you. You may not know how to start, but we'll help you do it. And I'm not saying you should run for Senate. I'm not even saying you should run for state office. Those are big endeavors that take a lot of money, and you might want to have a foothold in your community before you think about that. But I'll tell you what, how many of us can name members of our city council or our school board or elected positions that are local? I remember voting. I voted by mail this time around. There were some options on my ballot where there was either only one candidate on the list or like not enough candidates, even though I could vote for 2 or 3 people for a particular position. And that is so infuriating when you're running a political party where you're like, we just need bodies in the seats that could get elected. Not enough people run for office. I believe by one researcher's values, there are more than 500,000 elected positions in the United States. And I think even if you're active and you pay attention to politics, you probably are aware of a few hundred of them, maybe 1,000, because we think about the people in Congress. There's a lot of statewide races across the country, and that's about it. I mean, even if you're super engaged in politics, you only pay attention to maybe 1,000 races by and large. And yet that's such a small fraction of all the elected positions. And by the way, what impacts your life more? It's the city council. It's the state level politics. It's all of that. And for so many of those, even statewide races, there are so few candidates on the ballot running in the primaries. If you can, and I know not everyone can do it, but I think a lot of us as atheists have grown up with this idea that, well, that's a deal breaker for everybody. I can't even consider running for office. Guess what? If you're running for school board or city council, religion doesn't even come up as an issue. Rarely does it come up as an issue because you're talking about policy. You were talking about how to make people's lives better. It doesn't come up. No one cares. Only in those rare instances where there's like an invocation controversy do we talk about religion when it comes to city council. So think about it. Think about it in your city. And there are websites out there that can help you do it. I also particularly like this one called Get Her Elected. And I like it because it's specifically aimed at women, but they kind of say, they send out emails saying like, do you want to help a candidate? Are you good at websites? Are you good? I signed up as a public speaking coach because I coach a high school team. And I said, yeah, I'll help any candidate who is running for office who wants my help with public speaking. And they kind of connect you with people if you're a progressive. This is specifically progressive women. but it's awesome. They help women get elected and they help women get volunteers who can help them on the campaign. I love that. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to open it up for questions. I'll leave that up there in case anyone has it, and I'll stop the screen share. I just want to say thank you again to Evan for letting me chat with all of you. Thank you for showing up. Please, please, please become a member of Atheists United and give them donations if you can. It goes a long way. I really appreciate it. So, Evan, I'll leave it to you to figure out how to do questions.
Great. If people have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments so that we can't have 50 people talking at once, and on Zoom that becomes an absolute calamity. So please put your questions in the comments and I'll read a few. I've been writing down some of the comments and questions I've seen so far. Yeah, before we get started though, I just, I'm one of the few people that have worked in like helping atheists run for office. So I just really appreciate this talk. It was 2014 when we ran James Woods for Congress in Arizona, and he was the only open atheist trying to get federal office, and how radical the change has been in just a 6-year period is kind of unbelievable.
If you let me talk for 2 hours, you were in this presentation and I had to, you didn't make the cut at the end, but you're right. And that's one of the things that I was super excited about, because not just Evan, but what's exciting to see is seeing James Woods' campaign, seeing a couple of the elected officials in Arizona who are just open about their non-religiosity, and seeing atheists get involved with those campaigns and managing those campaigns is so exciting to see. And it opens this world of possibilities that when I became an activist and I became interested in this stuff, that was not an option. So to Evan specifically, I appreciate that you're kind of opening that door. I hope we see more of that in the future, because I don't know how many of these politicians who I showed in that spreadsheet had the sort of campaign managers or openly non-theistic people working for them. But I hope that becomes a thing in the future. That'd be really exciting.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, the beauty of that campaign I worked is we started our own consulting firm, and we started thinking about the institutions that support political campaigns, not just the campaigns itself. We get so focused on the candidates, but there's lots of ways you actually can help our community be represented and fight for its values. And so actually that's my first question. Some of the new organizations like Humanists for Biden, or, like there's been some massive progress in the past few years of new organizations and new campaigns that have come about, almost influencing, you mentioned Center for Free Thought Equality, that the PAC. Can you just talk about those really quickly, about the like larger institutions supporting the political movement outside of just the candidates?
Yeah, so you're seeing nonprofit groups, American Humanist Association being one, that actually have these advocacy arms now to push their values through politics. This is something the Christian right has always been really good at. And now you see some atheist nonprofits take those steps as well, which is exciting. This year, the Biden campaign actually reached out. They reached out to Greg Epstein, the humanist chaplain at Harvard and MIT, and said, we want to make sure we are reaching out to your community, at least in terms of the people who are willing to support us. And they actually got a coalition. I will freely admit I was a part of that group, volunteering with them, but basically saying, these are the issues that matter to us. We spoke with a representative from the Biden campaign and said, look, we don't get say over their policy, but we said, these are issues that matter to us. Please take this back to your bosses. This is something that means something to us. Include us at the table. And again, the campaign is over. We'll see what happens when the administration gets inaugurated and what happens after that. But it is kind of nice that you have a major political campaign basically saying, we don't want you to think you are left out. We need your votes, and we want to hear what you have to say. And there's an open question as to whether non-religious people will be invited to whatever they do with their faith outreach in the Biden administration. We have yet to see how that's going to work. But I think they are aware that we exist, that we represent a growing constituency that probably benefits them if they engage us. So we'll see what happens there. So that's exciting to see. That never happened with the presidential campaign before. Hillary Clinton's team did not reach out to atheists as a group to say, we want your support. So that's progress in a sense. Is it symbolic? We'll see. I hope we actually have a seat at the table in some capacity. I should also point out, because there are more atheists, more openly non-religious Americans than ever before, There's going to come a time when there are atheists running for office whose politics I know I will probably strongly oppose. There are atheist groups right now, particularly targeting Republicans and conservative views. I don't agree with them at all personally, but that's existing because we are this growing group of people. There is going to be what am I thinking of? There are going to be branches along that tree. And I should say that in itself is not necessarily a bad thing. Every growing movement is going to see those splits happen. I kind of look forward to the day when I show you that spreadsheet of all these candidates running for office and I can say, this person is running as an atheist and I don't like anything that person stands for. Right now, that has not happened. Everyone on that spreadsheet is basically running on a platform that I could probably get behind on a personal level. But I'm actually kind of surprised we haven't seen a conservative come out and say, I'm not religious, but these are the things I support. And so I'm just running on those issues. I'm actually surprised we haven't seen more of that, but it has not happened yet.
I actually think I need to send you one. We had someone reach out to my consulting firm and we would not work with them, but wanted help with their atheism. So I might actually add someone to your list.
That's interesting. I should say there was one in 2018. There was one state representative who was openly atheist, who was Republican. And he never came out as atheist before, but he kind of wrote an op-ed in a paper and admitted he was an atheist. And we're like, do you realize you're the only atheist Republican elected in that position in the country? He's like, I did not know that. And he came out, but then one of the questions everyone's kind of asking is, well, how does your views as a libertarian align with the very conservative Christian values that your party espouses in your party? And within a few months, he had said, I'm changing my party affiliation to libertarian officially on record. And then he ran for re-election as a third party candidate and got trounced. He is no longer in office. There are no sitting elected atheist Republicans.
Fascinating. There was a comment early on talking about Black, Indigenous, people of color communities and how essentially atheist identity is even more third rail there than the general public. Do you want to comment on that quickly?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. There are, I don't have anything to add to that. I think I just agree with that assessment. Being an atheist is something that means a lot to me because it's kind of been my identity for the better part of 20 plus years now. So when a politician comes out as an atheist, like there are flashing sirens that I can notice, you know what I mean? But obviously there are people who are non-religious, but whose primary identity may not be, they may be atheists, but they don't care. And I have no problem with that. Like I said, there are plenty of openly religious candidates who share my values. I have no problem with them running for office either. I have no problem with anyone saying like my background as a Native American, my background as XYZ, whatever it is. That's the thing I identify with more than anything. That's what I put front and center. Being an atheist may not be the thing I want to highlight, even if that represents who I am. And hey, whatever it takes to get that person in office, if I agree with their politics, you know what I mean? It's like, you do whatever it is you have to do. But if you happen to be an atheist, I hope it becomes safer to come out as such, to the point where it won't affect you if you're running for office, because in theory, it shouldn't. Let the atheist advocacy groups take care of that for you. Your job is to be a good politician and do the right things as a politician. It's not to do an activist's job for us.
Yeah. We have a lot of international attendees on this call. There were lots of questions on our event before this got started from an international perspective. Somebody commented in the chat about how Australia has had multiple atheist prime ministers. And I know I mentioned earlier, Mubarak Bala is in jail for his secular identity in Nigeria. Can you mention atheist political taboo kind of around the world, and if there's any data talking about that? Because this was a very American-centric talk, which is wonderful for us Americans, but I didn't know if you had some thoughts on the larger movement.
I actually don't have data on what the open atheists in other countries so much. I'd be very curious to seeing that. But usually the reaction I've gotten, especially from European countries and Australia and places like that, it's like, why is this even an issue in your country where being an atheist could be taboo, or where you have all these candidates bragging about how religious they are because that wouldn't fly in their countries. Maybe because part of it is just everyone kind of expects you to be default not really religious or only culturally religious. And the idea of saying like, I'm a Christian first and that's why you should elect me is absurd in those campaigns and other places. So in that sense, like, we are the anomaly and not necessarily in a good way. Now, when it comes to Mubarak Bala and when it comes to blasphemy laws, this is where I found it interesting that the Congressional Free Thought Caucus has these 14 Democrats on the roster. But just last week, there was basically a resolution passed saying blasphemy laws are bad and we need to protect freedom of expression even for unpopular opinions. And that was backed, I believe, in the Senate by James Langford of Oklahoma, who is a conservative Republican in every sense of that word. But he's like, yeah, I can get behind this resolution. Good. Of course you should. There's nothing in this that is anti-Christian. What's surprising to me is why more people haven't like signed on to those sorts of things, or why anyone would oppose it, or why, honestly, more Republicans who are less about social Christian values haven't joined the Free Thought Caucus. I don't think there's anything stopping them other than they think there's a downside for joining it to their base. But yeah, I'm when I see what other countries like, they have like in my prejudice bias point of view, like, they have normal political problems and we have very, very often religious based political problems. So it's like watching other countries discuss politics and looking at the issues they have to deal with. It's amazing to watch how they interact. Like, I've seen a lot of stuff from the UK and how they deal with parliament, and these bills are being passed, and like, the humanists there have input with the government officials there, like, this is going to impact our community specifically, we need you to address that. And then they do, and it's amazing. It's like, how do you do that? That's awesome.
One of the comments we hear a lot in atheist communities, which I think is used often to silence debate rather than help debate, is like, that's not an atheist issue. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before. But you did kind of mention in your talk that there are essentially some ideas that you think kind of come together around that. I mean, we've had incredible speakers in our history. Sakivu, who I think is actually on this, was one of our speakers recently, talked about a lot of issues we can and should be involved in as a community that don't fit with what I almost want to call like more European humanism ideas of what atheism is in America. So like, can you expand a little bit more about what you mean? Like, is there nothing we can align around? Is there something we align around? And maybe an extra layer of detail there could be like the difference between when we talk about the 35% of non-religious Americans versus the like 10% of atheist and agnostic Americans.
Yeah. So here, let me back up for a second. If you don't want atheist candidates running as atheists, I would think there are a handful of issues for people like me who have been atheists for a while. I don't need any convincing. I don't spend my day thinking about philosophy or theology stuff because, like, I don't know. I feel like I've had those conversations in my own head. I've thought through it. I'm an atheist. I'm good. So I don't need anyone trying to convince me why I should be an atheist. So the question then, for a lot of us who have been activists or involved in the atheist world for some time is, okay, I am an atheist. What do I do with that now? I don't need individual support for that necessarily. So what do I do with that? And this is where we put our values and our ideas into practice. So for politicians, the idea of supporting, what are some general things that stem from being an atheist? So for example, you may not be an LGBTQ rights activist, but what is the primary obstacle for LGBTQ rights? It's almost always religion. Think about science education or comprehensive sex education. What's the obstacle when people fight against it in public schools? It's usually coming from a religious perspective. So there are a lot of issues, even environmental climate change issues. Sakivu is interested in a lot of like criminal justice issues. If you care about evidence and you care about like public policy issues and how do we make decisions about these things, religion actually plays a heavy role in a lot of these issues that I think just by its nature, a lot of atheists would want to push back against, because you don't want religion influencing how we run our society on a lot of these issues. Some of them are very easily and directly influenced by faith, and I think in a very obviously bad way. Those are things, I think, if you are an atheist politician, you are running for any level, you could say, look, I am going to follow the facts. I am going to support church-state separation in theory, which is to say, just because a church wants to do this, that's not a good enough reason to do something. I want to do it because it helps everybody, and you got to treat everybody fairly. It would be entirely possible for a candidate to say, I support science education, I support LGBTQ rights, I support women's rights, and all of those things, which tend to be opposed by religious conservatives, you could push back against that and you would appeal to a lot of non-religious people. There are going to be some schisms. I mean, when it comes to ostensibly secular things like how should we run the economy, yeah, there might be conservative positions on that and liberal positions on that, and facts, depending on which facts you're using, we can go different ways. But some of these things seem very clear cut to me. And I think if you are a politician trying to appeal to as many people as possible, you could run on those issues and it would not be a problem, because you're appealing to a lot of people that way. By the way, I should say, going back to the question you asked a second ago about how atheist candidates and atheists as a whole have changed over the past several years, I have seen so much more cooperation between atheist organizations, advocacy groups, political wings that are secular in nature, working with progressive religious groups to get stuff done, where we kind of say, look, we can debate theology later. For now, we both agree, all of our groups agree, that when the government is giving taxpayer money to fund certain social projects, the groups that they give money to should not be able to discriminate just because their religion says something. I mean, this is something a lot of progressive groups, religious groups agree with too. I've seen so many resolutions, statement letters signed onto by atheist groups, Hindu groups, Baptist groups that are not like conservative Southern Baptists, but progressive Baptist groups. I mean, it's kind of incredible to see how much cooperation is going on politically between more liberal religious organizations and traditionally non-theistic groups too. And we're part of that mix now, because we're all saying, look, we represent the full gamut of America, not just one group of us. And so politicians should take it seriously.
If anyone else has questions, go ahead and put it in the chat. That's the place to ask them, and then I'll try to read them. If you think I've missed it, go ahead and just type it again in the chat, and I'll try to look for it. We're going to probably do about 3 more questions, and then we'll stop the recording. So thank you. And then I'm going to mute everyone that's not muted. Can you expand a little bit upon that idea? There was a question about, are we working with NOW, which is National Organization for Women? Talk about, I've seen American Atheists working a lot more with progressive coalitions, especially like the Supreme Court fight. I saw a lot of like messaging was actually coming from other organizations, because we now have more of a coalition built.
So let me answer that in 2 ways. For the Supreme Court battle, because that's something that affects everybody. So the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation hearing, this is an example of where you saw secular groups worried about the erosion of church-state separation, working with a lot of progressive religious groups to try to get the message out that we think Barrett's religion and how it influences her decision-making is fair game. We think you should not seat her for the following reasons. I mean, you saw a lot of cooperation. I know it didn't work, but you saw a lot of cooperation in that sense. When it comes right now, for example, so next week, there's the big Georgia Senate runoff elections. There is a group, Secular Democrats for America. Sarah Levin, who worked with the Secular Coalition of America, is running that organization. She's been working with Stacey Abrams' group, Fair Fight, to get non-religious people working phone banks and text banks to get people out to vote for the Democrats in that race. I'm not saying this in a biased way. I have not seen any of the conservative atheist organizations, the couple of them that are out there, doing anything for the Republican candidates in the race, but they are smaller. There are fewer people on that side. But there is an effort to get involved in elections at every level. And once those Senate elections are over and we figure out what's going to happen over the next couple of years, you're going to start seeing kind of where do we go from here? How can we get more candidates running for these offices? How can we get more policies passed at the local level, at the state level, where it's a little easier to get things done, as hard as it may be? I should say, like I said, I saw atheist groups becoming coalitions with a lot of progressive religious groups, even on a lot of Supreme Court briefs over the past few years. When groups file amicus briefs saying we support this position on a Supreme Court case, you see so many of the atheist legal groups signing on to briefs alongside progressive religious groups as well, saying, look, some of us are atheists, some of us are religious. We all support church-state separation, and we think this is a bad idea. And here's what's going to happen if you do this. And here's why the law is on our side. And again, those are huge developments for a group that, I don't know, when I got active myself, you did not see that level of cooperation or activism from atheist organizations at all.
Right. There's kind of a question about atheist communities, and I'll reframe it a little bit to, there's great data that just came out from American Atheists from their secular survey, where they surveyed 35,000 atheist Americans, essentially. And they found out a lot about the political alignment and beliefs of our community. And like, there's a lot more alignment, I think, than people talk about sometimes, but there's still a huge diversity. Ultimately, there are people on complete opposite ends of the political spectrum. Groups like ours, local community groups, advocacy organizations nationally, how much should they try to be almost apolitical or cater to the full spectrum rather than cater to the 80 to 90% that seem to agree on a lot of issues? I throw that out.
Yeah. I mean, in one sense, obviously, you can't do anything if you're a nonprofit group that is political in that sense. You do have to remain apolitical, but I think it would be beneficial for a lot of atheist groups to, one, encourage members to run for those offices. I know that almost seems over the head of a lot of people, but that's not a small thing. I promise you churches do that sort of thing a lot, and they're really good at it, and they have a lot to show for it. It would not be a bad thing for groups to run voter drives, voter registration drives, or to get members to do phone banking, text banking, knocking on doors when that's a safe thing to do. And I don't think it's weird for any atheist organization to say, look, we are not a political group. We are not saying we are an arm of one party or another, but these are the values we stand for. And if you don't agree with those, you should not be a member of this organization. You know, every church does that. Nonprofits do that. And they could say, like, we support, for example, LGBTQ rights, and we advocate for those, and that's fine. And if you can't sign on to that, then this may not be the group for you. But we need to see them get more active in volunteering with these local campaigns and pitching in to do whatever they can in their sphere of influence. I do want to point out, I didn't get to say this in the talk. This applies to deeply red districts as much as it does safe blue ones. And the reason, there's a selfish reason for this and there's a non-selfish reason. The non-selfish reason is there's a lot of people who want to get active. And sometimes when you feel, well, my vote's not going to make a difference because the other candidate's going to win. Well, trying to get that population woken up and rising to vote and getting them active, that actually does spur a lot of enthusiasm because they have nowhere else to go. And the other side to that is if there is someone like at the bottom of the ticket who is very deeply progressive and aligns with a lot of typically atheist views, who gets a lot of people excited, they could actually help people at the top of the ticket and vice versa. You get someone who's super progressive running for office. I think I saw this in 2018 with Beto O'Rourke in Texas. He's pretty progressive for Texas. And because he ran for office, even though he lost, there were a lot of candidates lower on the ballots, judges, statewide officials, who got elected because of the enthusiasm bump in places that may not have otherwise gotten those candidates elected. So running for office and getting people excited about candidates goes a long way, no matter where you are. And the selfish side of that is, I think that would also help atheist candidates. I think it would be better for us as a group if more atheists got involved in politics. So this applies just down the road. Non-religious organizations, one of the questions that I think comes up when it comes to communities, local communities, is, well, what are we doing here? We're not, obviously, Evan's, I'm sure, heard this before. Like, what do? Get together and not pray like every month? No, there is stuff we do. And some groups, especially ones that are established, have a lot of projects that they do, volunteering that they do, community building that they do. And that's all well and good. But if you're looking for something to do as a community, or you're looking to get started as a community, one of the things to say is, we have these values as non-religious people, whether it's, these are our humanist values, and we're going to work to implement them however we can. When it comes to, making the world a better place, we can volunteer. We do that as an organization, but we are also going to try to get politicians. We're going to do voter registration to try to get people elected who can get these things going. And that is not a partisan thing. That is saying we're going to get active in volunteering. We are going to get people registered so that our values can actually get implemented, because we think these values help everybody, not just us, but they do benefit us.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna do one last question, and then what we'll do is we'll end the recording and people can hang out. If Hemant wants to hang out, I'm sure he'll answer a few more questions. One of our board members, Klaus, likes to throw the hereafter party and calls himself the godfather of fun. So
Nice.
if you'd like to hang out for that, we kind of leave an open discussion and leave our Zoom call open for a while. So our last question by your good buddy, Richard Wade. You've shown that atheism is moving in a more from a negative to neutral position in the political realm.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt as many people anymore. Just say you're atheist.
Yeah. Do you think that there will be a similar pattern in the general social realm? And what does that look like?
Yeah. So the question is basically saying, if being an atheist is no longer a huge taboo in politics, certainly not as much as it used to be, what happens to us in general? Like, is it easier today to just come out as an atheist in general? And to be honest with you, I think if you asked high schoolers, like when I was in high school, when I was in college, I think it was weird to be an atheist because there weren't a lot of open atheists that I knew personally. So forming a group, a college group, for other atheists, that meant a lot to me because I didn't know any other ones. Whereas today, I think if you're going to any big public high school in the country, I think if you ask students, they all know somebody who's openly non-religious or who doesn't think about religion. I shouldn't say that. They do think about it. They're just not religious. That's not unusual. I thought there was, and I'm not going to go too much into this, there was a Christian writer a couple of weeks ago who said something like, he's basically a guy who thought he was gay for a long time, and now he says, I'm not gay anymore. And we could have that discussion another time. But one of the things he said is he wrote a memoir where he came out as no longer gay. And it hurt him in Hollywood where he worked because no one would hire him after that. But the thing that really got to me is he said, had I written a memoir last year that said, I'm coming out as gay, I would have gotten all these job offers. And I'm just sitting there thinking, you think it would have been a big deal last year to come out as gay? I don't think anyone in Hollywood would have cared. I don't think that would have generated any raised eyebrows at all. And to an extent, I think if you ask younger people, like, what does it mean if you're an atheist? I don't think they would care. I think they'd just be like, yeah, all right, whatever, join the club, buddy. So is everyone else. It is getting to the point where being an atheist is just not that big of a deal. And I don't see as many younger people claiming that as an identity as much as I did at their age, as much as I do now. And I think a generation of people, give or take, couple decades or so, I think we all grew up in this thing where being an atheist was a big deal to us because there weren't a lot of us. And it was kind of a big deal to come out and say as much. But honestly, if you're looking for atheists on television, if you're looking for people to say they're atheists, it's not that unusual to see people just come out and say they're not religious. So we are getting to the point where it's still a little taboo. Obviously, it's not easy if you live in certain states, if you live in certain conservative communities, but it's definitely not as unusual as it used to be. And I think that's a good thing. I think that is all the more reason the focus for all of us who care about these things and are active in these things. The question should not be, how do we make it easier for people to be atheists? Because I think that is happening already. But what do we do with our atheism now that we are atheists? And it's like, okay, well, most atheists share a set of values. let's try to show that. Let's try to implement those values in our society. And to me, politics is the kind of obvious way to do that.
Great. Well, thank you for, after a year of trying to organize it,
I
coming
know.
and speaking to our community. I'm going to end the live stream here in a second.
I hope I can join
but,
you all in person in the future. I mean, not just because it's winter in Chicago, but so I can come out there and see you all in person.
Yeah, we literally bought and moved his plane tickets multiple times. So it's exciting.
Yeah.
We got to host you eventually. For those of you, again, that aren't members of Atheist United, please go to our website, atheistunited.org, and become a member. Or if you are in the generous spirit, please consider a nice $20,000, $50,000 gift. That'd be great. We'll take 50 though, whatever you're in the mood for. Tax deductible. There's some great new tax incentives by some really weird tax laws that have happened over the past 2 years. So yeah, please support Atheist United. And if not us, support your other local atheist, secular, humanist communities. It really isn't possible for us to support atheist candidates and influence larger institutions without well-organized, stable, secular communities to support people. So thank you. With that, I'm going to wrap up our